Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer1745 here with my continuing playthrough of Hearts of Iron 3 with Black Ice 8 and Third Reich events. We are deep, as you can see, at least compared to historically, into the Soviet Union, and we're going to continue. We're still hoping things will work out. Well, we're still fighting to make things work out. I guess we could say that legitimately. Steiner getting a lot of experience with different traits, that's for sure. Okay. Ground attack tactics have advanced. That's good. Again, we're shutting that down because of our shift over to training officers and heavily making supplies. We have a lot of supplies right now. I'm just hoping I can dump huge numbers into the supply chain. Keep supplies flowing. Oh good, it looks like we're actually going to maybe make it deeper into the Congo. No, okay, yeah. Now we're expanding the Leningrad front there. Oh well, we knew that was going to happen. Started to attack, I didn't realize that this was a swamp province. So Once I figured that out, I aborted the attack. Let's move into the vacated province. But I decided not to attack because it was fortified, and one of the posters, I forget who posted the thing, sorry about that, talked about the, like, 170th, I think, tank brigade or something, and how many do they have? Well, here's what's the 5,000th Soviet tank brigade, so all propaganda. All propaganda. The AI is trying to fake me out. Make me think he has 5,000. Tank brigade somewhere. Yeah, some forts or pillboxes there. Unless it would cut them off. That would be a worthy thing. Okay, a bunch of events have hit, I think. Okay, Special Forces Combined Arms have advanced. That's nice, but we're canceling that. HMS Furious is lost, probably out at the same time that is it Hai was lost. Hai was lost. Out in the Pacific somewhere, presumably. Okay, Division Azul, the Blue Division. These are don't know if I've talked about much about some of the Spanish contributions. These were regular. Thought I did, but I don't know. Regular Spanish soldiers. They with a Now, a lot of Spanish soldiers, not all, not maybe even most, but many Spanish soldiers were also fascist or phalangist, as the Spanish call it. Were in the army, of course, and sort of got its name from, they had dual uniforms. They wanted to wear a Spanish or fascist type uniform, but since Spain wasn't in the war, they had to wear German uniforms. Now, as you can see on the nice color photo here, they did have a Spanish shield on their helmets, and as the patch there shows, they had a Spanish patch on their arm, but in the German uniforms. When they weren't on frontline duty, I don't know how often that was, they were allowed to wear a more phalangist type uniform that had a blue shirt. So that's how, at least some of the reasons they got the name the Blue Division. So yes, we want that. The Hiwis, these were volunteers. Early on, particularly, many of them were just Russian soldiers that were captured, and a lot of divisions got to 30 to 40%. Well, a lot, that's maybe a bit overstating it. Some divisions got to 30-40% Russian volunteers, until they sort of had to put the sort of limiting factors and brakes on it, because they didn't trust the Russians, the quality, and a lot of them joined because they were anti-Soviets, or pro-Kaiser type, or Tsar types. But I think also a lot of them, especially early on with all the big surrounding, they were just wanting to join their winning team as well. And like I was saying, very early on, they were still just wearing their Soviet uniforms and doing a lot of support labor for the divisions. And they were, locally volunteered and were helping out, carrying ammo, doing the non-combat support stuff. As time went on, more and more combat duties that they were taking on, and they would be given like a German jacket. It varied whether they had the German eagle with the swastika below it in the army. You can see pictures of them standing next to each other. Some do and some don't. It was theoretically the idea that they weren't supposed to, because they weren't have that on them, because that was for German soldiers and not for others. But they, for a long time, continued to wear their Russian uniforms under their German ones. I don't really think it was a sense of being able to change the uniform, just lack of uniforms and cold nights and those kinds of things, so that they continue with that. As time went on, they, and I think we will be having some of these formed more and more units of volunteers, not just helpers, and like this is just given as manpower, helpers to the German units. SS Panzer Brigade, yes, we want that. Tank Destroyer Brigade, yes, we want that. Supplies for Crete, not at this time. I don't know the agricultural industry. Okay, lose 500 money, gain supplies, manpower. Now, okay, yes, absolutely. Okay, TRE event. The MKB-42 field trials. And no, what you see there is not a Sturm, well, it is a Sturmgewehr, but it isn't the STG-44 or the MP-44 or whatever you want to call the later. That is a earlier version of the weapon. And so the first small batch of both the Hennel and Walther models were designated the 42H and W, respectively, sent to the Eastern Front for trials against Soviet troops. Initial results were promising, with the Henny rifles being generally preferred due to their better reliability. The Walter design, which showed better single-shot accuracy, was rejected as unsuitable on the grounds of its questionable annular gas system, or gas piston system. After extensive test trials, there were significant improvements. I sort of maybe removed a few things to make it fit and they didn't need to. Sometimes things get run too long, but this one obviously isn't. This was designed by Schmeitzer. So we can support the development, which will lose a bit of supplies, and gain a little research on assault rifles or not. We're going to support the development of it. Alida round is the particular thing. Was a perfume soap maker. That's an advertisement from the war period there. Famous soap made by the perfumery Alida, founded in Leipzig in 1925. We need to keep our people healthy and clean. This is, I just found the advertisement, thought it was very interesting to see Third Reich period advertisement, especially something sort of that wasn't just swastika covered kind of thing. And so we can lose a little bit of supplies or lose some popularity. We're going to lose a little bit of supply. This is just not necessarily represents just that one soap company, but generally speaking, the home front costs of things. No, I'm not going to rename these things because it'll remove them, and they're in the middle of fighting and have good commanders, and I think that's all it does is rename them. So we're going to stick with it somewhat outdated. Never really liked these events. Let's see. National revolt risk, manpower down 5%. I guess we'll do that. Okay, the military police for the Ukraine. Yes, we want to do that. As you can see, and I just before this episode did some sending of troops, some units around that are redeploying. We're having some potential problems. That's probably some of the stuff affecting our supply. So yes, in the new version, or in a currently released but newer version that I'm playing with of TRE, has a bunch of which when the AI was playing with them had a bit of problem. A bunch of volunteer units from the Baltic states and places like the Ukraine, as opposed to that was the German armies, or well, no, the German police's unit to control the Ukraine. There were also locally raised forces to do the same job, and so what Vlad Virgil did was create a bunch of the units that are so there were a lot of them, but because of the number was sort of higher than the manpower that we researched and have, a lot of them start out like at half strength. So you can click on them to not reinforce kind of thing and keep them at half strength, or allow your manpower to go on them. So we sort of look at that as, because often they'll go, oh, battalion 1 through 6 spread around when they're only like half battalion in strength. So, and we give them, generally speaking, without very many manpower penalties, because they're representing locally recruited volunteers. You can allow them to get up to full strength, which would represent German manpower flowing into them to reinforce them if you wish. I and all the contributors who, because they generally you get on board and agree. We don't want to give you free things that weren't going in the real war. So when we find, yeah, I know you get some manpower from occupying all this, but it's not really much, and there, you know, the Ukraine really would have supported the anti-Soviet fight. It was more, and even with the sort of German desire to occupy the Ukraine and turn it into a German province, and wanting the food that it was growing to supply the German troops, the German population, and everything else, they wanted to do that. I also think that they wanted to lower the population a little bit so they wouldn't mind that some of them starved, and other bad things. The Germans' policy towards the Ukraine was not very good. Now, the Soviet policy, I think, was actively even worse. You don't have any supplies. Was actively even worse than the Germans. There's a lot of cases of, we got as far as cannibalism under the Soviets in the region, and the Soviets put troops out to guard the fields, and anybody going out into the fields they would shoot, so because people trying to get the supplies, and they were trying to starve them out. So the Ukrainians were, you know, very much between the proverbial rock and the hard place, you know, as to neither side was good to them at all in long term. So even after a fairly long period of bad German behavior, they were still getting Ukrainian volunteers to fight in one capacity or another against the Soviets or the partisans. And yes, a lot of the partisans were Ukrainians because they just had jumped the other way in the fight. So that I think would have been dramatically the other direction had the Germans not quite. I mean, you know, you may very well argue that the Germans needed to take a certain amount of the food out, but you didn't maybe need to take quite as much. And you could have put out clear statements of national policy that there was going to be a Russian state, there was going to be a Ukrainian state, and these kinds of things that would have gotten many more volunteers. And had the Germans not been so harsh in their anti-partisan campaigns of collective responsibilities, the idea that attack happens near a village, so the Germans figured, well, the villagers must have known about the attack, or some of them did, so we're going to burn the village and kill the people there, kind of things, would piss everybody off, as opposed to trying to target the individuals. So it was ugly, very ugly. But so we've looked at the idea of wanting to simulate the various pro-German elements that were happening, and to simulate the other elements. We don't specifically have events because I haven't went in and developed them, but they have the, well, Black Ice has lots of partisan creating events already, but there's also the ability for the Soviet AI, because I know I've seen it, like, we're up here, oh, we can now attack. They ran out of supplies. Create partisan uprisings. Okay, the 270th Infantry Division. Don't know what BOD specifically stands for. 10th Wave well apart. Okay. Prepare the defenses. Okay. Deploy the 12th Flak Division. We lose Cologne. How are we doing for? Only 2. Yeah, we'll go with that. More Soviet captured weapons, yes. We will take that. Okay, we'll sell some supplies. Looks like somebody wants to join our faction. Oh, yay! Yay, 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 yay. Spain. Now I don't yet have, we'll see once we get them in, how strongly Gibraltar's defended. It looks like it's entirely undefended. Okay, these are doing very important things, but I'm gonna load them up onto these planes and see if they can go take Gibraltar before the British can react. Where are the Ukrainian police? Where did these guys end up? Okay. That's a sort of heavy fortress division there. Well, flat. Oh good, they're sort of already towards the front. We will send them up here. Help hold the flank. Let's see if we can find a police general for him. Oh, bro. I'm gonna pause this for a minute, be right back.